What is technology?
Well, I mean, technology from the Greek techne is just any art that man invents with his reason to improve his way of life, to improve some process that we do naturally as human beings. So naturally, we speak, we communicate, but writing is a certain simple form of technology. It had to be invented. Alphabets had to be invented. Manuscripts, papyrus, figuring out how to write things had to be, that's all technology. And then, of course, it's developed from there in terms of communication. We need to get around. We walk around. We might run. But then people invented chariots, or they rode on horseback, or, then later on they invented carriages, and then eventually bicycles and cars and airplanes and everything else. So at least in theory, the purpose of technology is to make our life better, is to make our life easier in a way that should allow us to be more fulfilled as human beings, maybe to spend less time scraping the clothing against the washboard and more time doing something that is distinctively human, like singing and making music and reading and thinking and and having good conversations and worshiping God, celebrating the feasts of the saints. That in a certain way, we want to be freed to do higher and better things. And so, of course, implicit in saying that is already a criticism that if technology develops in a certain direction that, in fact, demeans or diminishes or distracts or dilutes what it is to be human, then you can seriously question whether that technology is, in fact, useful for us. It might even be dangerous, right?
And even those technologies that do save us time, is it the sin of sloth that leads us to waste our time when it does? We do find that, in fact, that it is saved? Yes.
I mean, let's just put it this way, right? I was at an exhibit recently at a children's museum because I was visiting with some children of friends. And there was this whole exhibit about pioneer life in America and, how hard it was. And they had all these heavy iron pans. And there was an interesting sign there. The sign said, because of the way these people lived, they were naturally strong. They developed muscles, and they could lift a lot. And, in other words, they were not lazy and passive and overweight and so on. And it seems like when people invented, let's say, washing machines and dryers and things of that sort, it's not as if suddenly everybody was now reading literature and, doing wonderful things that they couldn't have done before. They were just sitting and watching the television on the couch, while the machines were doing the work for them. So I think that, technology is a two-edged sword, and it always is. I want to be clear about this. Marshall McLuhan talks about this a lot. Neil Postman talks about this too, that every technological advance causes a loss of something. And sometimes we're willing to, actually most of the time, we're willing to put up with that loss, or we think that the gain compensates for the loss. But the fact is there is a loss. And let me just give a concrete example that isn't so highly charged as the technological example, as what we call nowadays technology, by which we usually mean computers and machines and so on. But Plato talks about the invention of writing, the damage that the invention of writing does. And you think, what could possibly be wrong with writing? We want to encourage people to read and write and so on. And that seems very traditional and old-fashioned nowadays, and it is. But Plato makes the point that when you start writing things down in books, then you have less incentive for remembering them. And so what he's commenting on is the transition from an oral culture to a text-based culture. And if you read about cultures that are predominantly oral, such as the Native Americans, or many native cultures don't have writing, they don't have libraries. What that means is they remember a huge amount. They carry the wealth of their culture within them. They can tell stories endlessly. They have this huge internal library that they're drawing from, and that gets passed down from generation to generation in a way that means each member of that culture has a more abundant interior life as regards their cultural wealth, their cultural heritage, than we have, even though we have gigantic libraries, or we have, archive.org or whatever immense search engines we have. all of that stuff is external to us. We don't remember it. We don't memorize it. It's not part of us. And so, it's kind of silly when people say things like, well, now with Google, Google Books, we have millions of books at your fingertips. Nobody's ever had this before. And I want to say to that, if you don't have any of those books inside of you, then first of all, you don't even know what you're looking for, right? I mean, this is a Socratic paradox. If you don't know what you're looking for, how are you ever going to find it?
The College of St. Joseph the Worker is an amazing college where students combine higher education with hands-on trades and Catholic formation. Go to collegeofstjoseph.com/MattFrad.
So you have to have knowledge within you in order to even gain further knowledge outside of you. And secondly, that library, if I'm surrounded by 1,000 books on my shelves, but I haven't read a single one of them, that's just decorative. That's just a kind of, makes me feel good about myself. But I don't have that content within me. So again, every form of technology is a sacrifice of some precious good that was there before. And so what I want to ask about a lot of modern technology is, are we sufficiently aware of what we have sacrificed in order to adopt this or that?
Mark Barnes, who you may have heard of from Steubenville, has
New Polity.
Has a great article, I think, on the automobile, and he has this great line. He says, "A man with a car in a world made for feet is a god. A man in a car in a world made for cars is in traffic."
That's fantastic. Good. Oh, goodness. Talk about
But that's one of the things we've lost. I mean, I was just living in Europe, and we were in a little small town, and we'd go to a big city in Europe, and it's very walk-friendly.
Yes,
it's made for human beings.
Exactly.
I come back here to Florida, I got to drive 20 minutes through, ugly, really, because it's just concrete roads, stores that all look identical. How do you live in close-knit community when the closest person is 25-minute drive away or something?
Exactly.
So we've lost something there.
No, and this is a point on which I think Wendell Berry is really the most eloquent critic of how America has developed in this regard. He talks about how the interstate system, in a sense, destroyed locality. It made it possible for everybody to travel anywhere in such a way that it increasingly dissolved the attachment of people to particular places, towns, states, regions. I think I don't know what the statistics are, but it seems to me that very many Americans, if you ask them, where are you from? They would say, well, I was born in this place, I grew up in this place, I moved here after college, I moved over there, and I don't really belong anywhere. I mean, I've met great people everywhere I've been, I have friends, life is good, but I really don't belong anywhere. I don't see myself as,
That's right.
as a Carolinian or a Texan or a Californian. And when you meet people, I love meeting people who say, I am a Texan. We've been here for 4 generations.
I love that too.
And I think that is so beautiful. And you get that in Europe too a lot. I lived in Europe for 7.5 years in Austria. And I was astonished, in a good way, by how many Europeans I met who would say, my family's been here for 500 years or 1,000 years, or we don't even know how long we've been here. The records just go back so far. And they wouldn't even think of moving. Or if they moved, it was like 15 minutes away, or some kind of bold move, like a half an hour away. But it was, we belong to this region. We speak this dialect among ourselves. We on special occasions, we might even dress in a certain way that is particular to this region. I think that's so beautiful. And my friends in Europe too, they can't believe Americans who say things like, oh yeah, I just went to visit my parents. They only live 8 hours away. I mean, they're pretty close to us. And like, what, are you kidding? Like, you can drive across half of Europe and that,
It's amazing how quickly this transition took place. I think Australia obviously moved slower than America technologically. And, my parents grew up in the same town as each other, and everyone they knew grew up in the same town as each other. But now here I am living in America. My sister lives in America, and she's in Ohio. I'm in Florida, so even that's a gigantic distance. So, yeah, it is, but it's crazy just the kind of tectonic plate shift that's taken place in culture that's probably destroyed culture. Depends what we mean by culture. But
no, it's true, and this is a huge problem. That culture, I mean, we all know this, but culture comes from the word cultus, which is connected to the verb for cultivating the land. So you cultivate the land. That's the most basic thing that human beings do as soon as they settle down, as soon as they stop being hunters and gatherers who are wandering around nomadically, looking for their food, looking for good weather, whatever the case might be. As soon as they settle down, they start farming. From that agriculture, that culture of the field, that cultivation of the field, comes, in a certain sense, comes now a cultivation of arts, practical arts initially, like iron working and leather working and whatever tools are needed to build up a village life. And then you get to fine arts once that culture has risen to a certain level, and there's time for leisure, and there's a certain stratification where some people are doing the farming, but other people are in the village teaching, or you've got clergy now, and they're more literate. And so then you have the fine arts after the practical arts, after the farming begins. And at the top of that whole sort of hierarchy of culture is the divine cultus, the cultivating, as it were, of God, which of course means something very different from cultivating potatoes. It means to now God is the one before whom we come. We approach him in humility, and we are his clients. We are asking him, fundamentally, we're asking him as needy creatures to bless us and our efforts. And so this whole kind of structure of culture, which I would say is embodied perfectly in the European village centered on a church, right? You go into a little European village, and what do you see? On the most prominent place, or in the most prominent place in town, in the center, is this beautiful little church. Everything is built around that church, almost like radiating concentric circles. And you hear the bells pealing from the bell tower, calling people to prayer. And it's this coherent, centered life that, you come to America, and where is the center of our cities? Do our cities have centers? They're just sort of miscellaneous, eclectic assemblages of buildings and people and traffic, as you said. So I think it's very hard to be centered in a world that has chosen a kind of de-centered, denatured, always mobile, always changing.
Thank you very much for watching that Pints with Aquinas clip. If you like it, do me a favor, click like and subscribe, and please offer a Hail Mary for the work of Pints with Aquinas and all the people we're trying to reach. God bless you.